So I'm probably going to be splitting this into a few videos because there's a lot to go over. But here in Japan, one of the biggest subjects that we do in school, and at least in the first 2 or 3 or so years of school, it takes up the most time by far in school, is what we call Kokugo, which is the language of the country, which here is Japanese. So uh, and in Japan, there are plenty of things that you study for the language. We have a list from the education board here. It's just so many things on here. We won't go over everything, but some of them are even learning to love nature and uh, understanding your country, having understanding yourself as a Japanese person, loving your country, all that sort of thing is included, I guess, in the language studies. But of course, the main things are being able to read and write and understand grammar. And probably biggest of all is learning kanji. And this is basically the alphabet system that we have here. So there's three major alphabets. I don't think alphabet is the correct term, but it's probably gets the point across that we have here. We have the Hiragana, the Katakana, and then Kanji. And the first two are very basic. Each one includes, it depends how you count the characters, but let's say roughly 50 letters for each one. And then there's sort of ways that you can adapt the letters to change the sounds. So it's very, what do you call, phonetic language, I guess. And so a lot of kids will learn hiragana and katakana before they enter elementary school, but this is not any kind of requirement. So a lot of kids, the first time that they ever actually learn to read or write is once they get into elementary school. And so you start with the hiragana, katakana, and then near the end of that school year, you would get into the kanji. So let's just take a quick look at the kanji that they expect elementary students to learn here. Okay, we've got the first year, you learn 80 characters. Here they are, all listed up. Let me just highlight these. Yeah, here's the 80 characters that you learn the first year. Second year, they double that as 160 more characters. And something, I guess, maybe people outside of Japan might not know, but my understanding is that in China and other countries that use similar character sets, there's usually one reading for each of these characters. But in Japanese, for most of them, we'll have at least two. Some of them will have 10 or more. There's like some of these characters, even in the first year, there's like a character or two that just 17 readings or something. So it's kind of difficult to explain how that works. I guess one way to think about it is like the letter C in English. You can read that as like a K sound, k, or an S sound, s, or if it's paired with an H, it would be like ch, or let's say READ for read and read. It's spelt the same, but the context would change how you say it and change the meaning of the word itself. And it's kind of like this, but way more complicated and way more situations like that. And it is not, I would say it is not very organized. Like there's no rules that are actually laid out. There are like general instances where this is probably how you would read something in some way. So we basically take all these kanji and split them into the on yomi and the kun yomi, which a lot of people consider that like Chinese reading and Japanese reading. Although, again, that's not entirely accurate, but for the sake of keeping the video kind of short, we will say that is the case. So 2 major readings, and within those readings, sometimes there's several of them. And if you have 2 kanji or more stuck together, the general rule of thumb is you're more likely going to use the Chinese reading to read it out, but for both of the characters. But there are situations where both of them become the Japanese reading, or where one character will become Chinese reading and the other a Japanese reading, even though they're stuck together in a single word. So, and there's actually words to describe all of these, so it's quite complicated. We won't get into that now anyway, but I just want to mention that for kids and for adults, this is very, very difficult. So, 80 characters in the first year, 160 in the second year. In the third year, look, we got 200 characters. Also, the complexity of some of these characters is, I would say, definitely increasing. Some of these are what I would say are no longer easy anyway. We go to the fourth year again. For any Naruto fans, you'll probably know this first one here. So again, the characters themselves are getting more and more complex. And we have 202 in the fourth year. I think that's the most you learn in a single year in elementary school, but we'll find out in a moment here. So that's quite a few, right? 202 in 1 year. If you think of how many days that you're at school each year, let's see, you learn one character. So again, this is not the only thing that you learn in the language class. You would also be learning, regular grammar. You'd be reading books and learning about, sort of the history of language and all that sort of thing too. So, fourth year, 202. Fifth year, 193. Okay, yeah, it gets a little bit lower. Again, fifth year. Let's just take a quick look here. Yes, some of these I would say are pretty tough. And in Japan, a lot of the time, especially since the era of like smartphones and computers, I would say most people can, in most situations, again, there's a lot of potential readings for these, read regular words that include almost all these kanji. Most adults would be able to read all these kanji in regular words most of the time. But when it comes to writing by hand, I would say even at this level of like fifth grade elementary, a lot of adults will have already forgotten how to write them, or they won't come to mind. And this is partially due to, the how technology advanced and how few people regularly write by hand anymore. And yet, sort of if you go apply for any sort of documents at the ward or the city office or whatever, usually you have to write things out by hand. So you'll see people looking up on their phones often. Oh, how do you write this? I don't remember. Right. So it's kind of a funny situation. What would that be? A dichotomy of society, perhaps. So 193 in year 5, and then year 6 of elementary school. Again, we are getting a few tough ones in here. And how you describe tough, I think, will vary person to person. But like this one here in the Constitution, right? I think a lot of people will not be able to write that by hand, but probably most people will be able to read it. And when I say people here, I mean like just adults. If you just tell them just randomly, hey, write this character, they'll be like, oh, what was it? But if you show them in context, they probably know. So this is just a brief description. Okay, so 6th year, go down 191. So that is a lot. I think that's 1026. So 1026 characters that you learn during elementary school. So that's a lot. And again, these are they're not just a single reading. You don't just learn it and you're done. You will be learning the same letter basically will come up 20 years later in your life, and you'll see it and you'll say, I never knew you could read it that way. Or maybe you'll say, oh, I didn't know that was the writing order. And I'll give more specific examples of this later. A good one that just comes to mind would be from year 2 here. Let's look and see if I can find it. A kanji. I actually have been mistaken the writing order for this my entire life, and I asked like a bunch of friends and stuff. Everybody I've asked so far has been writing it incorrectly, and by writing it incorrectly, I mean the order of writing, not the outcome. So this is another thing we'll get into in a moment here. The order of writing is something that people seem to take seriously in elementary school and I think middle school, but once you get to high school and beyond, the order of writing, people sort of just don't worry about it anymore. But like, let's say you're doing math, right? And I actually saw my teacher explaining this in class because once in a while you can go to class and watch the teachers teach the students. I was able to sit in on a math class from my son was taking, and his teacher was telling all of the students, okay, when you write the plus sign, you write you go sideways first, and then top to bottom. And like if you wrote top to bottom and then sideways, the teacher would say, no, that's not correct, right? So uh I think this is kind of weird. And like let's say you're writing the number 0. You start from the top and go back to the top. I sometimes actually write 0, like starting to the bottom and going back to the bottom. And again, this would be seen as incorrect in a lot of educational situations. It's um, kind of, I think a lot of people will say, oh, that why does that even matter? And for the most part, I kind of agree. Okay, why does that matter? Um, Sometimes it will actually influence the outcome of what a letter or number looks like. And a lot of people here want numbers and letters to look very beautiful. Anyway, one of the characters I want to bring up is this one right here. So this is the character for like what? Nani? Right? And this specific character, you write the part on the left here, and then you write the straight line on the top. And then what I think most people do is write this line going down here next. That's what I'd always done. But you're supposed to write the let's just call it a box in the middle here, and then do the line on the right hand side last. And this is the same for I'm not actually sure what year this is. There's another character very similar in how it looks. So I'm going to see if we can find it, but if we can't find it quickly, we'll just say there is a character that is written the same basic way. I'm not seeing, I don't think it would be this low anyway. I guess I would say if it's not near 2 or 3, I'll just give up on finding it for now. But again, this same writing order that most people might not even know. People who grew up in Japan only speak Japanese and have never, never even spoken any other language. They will still probably not write this character correctly. Another one for the first year that actually came up, that like, let's say half the people I talked to were writing incorrectly. I don't even remember if I was writing it correctly or not. I just thought, like, when I'm watching my son study for the test, I would just say, okay, that's how you write it. And then I would try and think, which way am I writing it? So this rice field character here, like the box with the plus inside of it. Uh, anyway, you do the top of the box, and then you go the vertical line and then the horizontal lines. So a lot of the time it will be horizontal first and then vertical and then horizontal. Like, for example, the one right beside it, this would be horizontal, vertical, horizontal. But this one here is vertical, horizontal, horizontal. And why am I mentioning all this? It's because on the Kanji Kentei, which is the test that actually tests your level of Japanese based in kanji, these are some of the questions that they actually ask you on the tests. Now, let's take a quick look at the Kanji Kentei. So this is the page. They say anyone from 3 to 103 is taking this test, and every year they have 1.4 million people taking this test. So that's a lot of people taking the test. So they have levels 10 to 1, which is 12 levels. I think in other videos I've described why this would be 10 to 1. That doesn't sound like 12, but we have pre-1 and pre-2. And these are the most common pre-something tests. You'll even find them in like Jujutsu Kaisen and stuff, right? Panda is a pre-2 sorcerer. And was it Toge Inomaki Senpai? I think is pre-1. Anyway, that's kind of a different subject, but yeah. So 12 levels of the kanji test. And the lowest level for kanji is the level 10 here. Level 10. So level 10 is basically everything, understanding everything that you learn in the first grade of elementary school. And the tests, they will often include questions that are structured in a way that just understanding the kanji will probably not be enough in a lot of situations. At the level 10, I don't think you need a lot of understanding of like grammar and context and everything, but this increases as you go up in levels. Like once you're at the top levels, it will be virtually impossible to pass just by trying to memorize, like, okay, if these characters come up, it will be this, or if it tells me to write this thing, it will be these kanji, which I'm talking very abstract here, so it might be confusing, but let's take a look. So the level 10, the main areas of subject are reading, writing, and the stroke order or total stroke count of each character. So I was talking a lot about stroke order earlier, but there's also stroke count. So how many of these, how many times do you like take the pen off the page? And this is not at all about efficiency. Like something could be super connected in how it looks in the end, and it will actually be multiple strokes. I'll just get a quick example here. Let's see right here. So child, this one right here, middle. um, child. So this, it looks like you could easily write that 2 strokes, but it's a 3 stroke. So the top part, and then the vertical line thing here, and then the horizontal, right? So that's just one of those things where, take your page, you take your hand off the page and then, or off the paper, and then do the next stroke. And in practice, I think a lot of people do not take their hand off the page. Like even this box like one over here, you'll see this is 1, 2, 3 strokes. But if you're writing by hand, a lot of people will do that in what would be considered 1 stroke in reality. So so just for reference. All right. So let's see, what have we got here? So this test, the level 10 test, there are 150 points worth of questions on the test. That's not necessarily 150 questions, but there are quite a few questions. And in general, questions that you write the answer for are going to be worth 2 points. Or sorry, questions where you write the kanji for are going to be worth 2 points. Questions where you write the reading of the kanji are going to be worth 1 point. They might actually give you 2 points for everything at this level. I don't remember. But the passing grade, you need at least 80%. And I think this is actually a very high percentage, especially for the level 10. So these are people who, they're first graders or second graders are the people who mostly take the level 10 here, right? My son took it right before first grade, and I'll actually show that to get out of the way. But you got this certificate here. Very nice. And if you take the test on the same, well, the test is generally 3 times a year, and there are a few other ways to take some of these tests, but in general, there's 3 times a year. If you take the test at the same time, so I think we discussed in the math one, you could take it any time during the year and apply as a family. But for the kanji one, if you take it you have to take it during the same period. So basically the same day in most cases as someone in your family, you can apply for a family certificate. And I did that. I took it with my son. I got a perfect score, of course. This is, again, first grade elementary. So for me, it was not really anything new. But we took it together and we both passed. So I could apply for this family certificate, which is nice to have on the wall as well. We'll see. I might do the next level up with him as well. But after that, I think I will probably focus on my own higher up journey. And what I'm doing is this just for reference, the pre one. So that's roughly 3,000 characters. And all of the 2,136 characters learned up until that point, will also be included with often with different readings that you would have never seen at least on tests before. You might have seen them in some like rare instances. So this level is like it gets kind of weird. And this one also requires 80%, but 200 points. And again, the points aren't necessarily the number of questions. So it's probably going to be, I don't know. I've never actually counted, but I'd say maybe 100 questions or so. Maybe more. Yeah, I guess there would be more. So yeah, there'd definitely be more than 100 questions. Anyway, a lot of questions, and you have 1 hour for the test. So 80%. So the level 1, and let's look, level 1, 6,000 characters. So the level 1, this is basically like a university graduate degree in honors or whatever. There are very rare instances where I think an elementary grade student has passed this. There's like, I've heard of it happening twice. Might have actually happened more, but just to compare that, I've heard of a 10-year-old who passed university and got a university degree at age 10. So, just because there's outliers doesn't change the fact that it's ridiculously hard. And then level 2 again, also 80%. Once you get to level pre-2, it's a 70% passing. And that 70% all the way to level 7, it's also 70%. But then level 8, 9, and 10 all require 80%, which again, I find kind of weird because, 10, 9, and 8, these are for, more beginners, but the threshold is a lot lower. And another thing I guess to mention here is from the level 7, the number of questions increases, and I think from level 7 you actually get a mark sheet that you have to write the answers on a different piece of paper than the question is listed on, whereas levels 10 through 8, I think 8 is the same, but they will give you the paper with the questions and you just write the answer beside the questions, which is a lot more natural, I think. It's how practice questions also come up. Anyway, again, there's so much to talk about here that at some point I'm going to have to cut this video off. But the level 10 is what I want to focus on right now. So we will look at the questions themselves in the next video, some sample questions, and see what you're expected to do more specifically. I just want to go over the explanation of what this test is and sort of give an idea of how difficult it is and whether or not this is actually good. I think a lot of people complain about. There's a programmer I used to work with years ago. He's older than me. He hates kanji. So again, a Japanese man who's only ever lived in Japan, only speaks Japanese. He hates kanji. He thinks the time spent learning all this is completely a waste of time, and he does not spend any time learning to write the kanji. If he can't write it by hand, he doesn't care, that sort of thing. So there's a lot of very different opinions. And then on the flip side of that, there are people who think, kanji is pretty much the core of Japanese culture. And, the Japanese heart or whatever you would call it is in kanji in a way. So very differing opinions on this. Personally, I do think that kanji is important in Japan. I think learning kanji is important, and I think learning how to learn kanji will help you learn in this in the sense of a meta skill as well. So this is sort of a deep conversation. So definitely in the comments, if you think that learning kanji is useful and important, and I don't just mean learning to read, because obviously being able to read, let's say, just regular stuff is very important. But if you think that being able to write everything out by hand, learning the stroke order, and learning all this stuff is important, definitely mention that in the comments. And if you think that is a waste of time, and Japanese schools should focus a lot of this time on the sciences or math or civics or whatever, instead, just like my programmer friend, then I also mentioned that in the comments. So let me know what you think. Remember to like and subscribe, and be here for the next video when we take a look at some practice questions. Level up.